Welcome to the Wicket.
Hello, and yes, it's time for another round of cricket chat for you at The Wicket, Arab News' very own cricketing podcast. I'm your host, Brian Murgatroyd, and with me, as ever, to discuss what's happening in the sport locally in the Gulf, regionally in Asia and worldwide, Arab News columnist Jon Pike and Arab News cricket reporter Subas Humagain. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Brian. Hello, Subas.
Hi, John. Hi, Brian.
And in this episode, we chat about the start of a T20I series between Zimbabwe's men looking to get back on track after recent poor form and India without their T20 World Cup stars. We discuss two ongoing women's series, that's India versus South Africa and England against New Zealand. We reflect on the international career of James Anderson, the England fast bowler, who's due to bow out after the Lord's Test match against the West Indies. We catch up on goings-on in two T20 franchise leagues currently taking place. That's Major League Cricket in the USA and the Lanka Premier League in Sri Lanka. We also discuss a high-profile appointment within Sri Lanka. And on top of that, as ever, Subas and Jon tell us what's caught their attention over the past week. Lots to get our teeth into then, so let's get cracking. While one India men's team was taking the cheers of thousands of fans in Mumbai after arriving home with the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, another group of players was in Zimbabwe for a 5-match T20I series against the hosts. It's an important series for both teams, for Zimbabwe to get their show back on the road after failing to qualify for successive ICC events, that's last year's ICC Cricket World Cup and the recent T20 World Cup in the Caribbean and the USA. And for India, it was a chance to look at the next generation of players, especially after the triple T20I retirement announcements of Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma and Ravindra Jadeja following the success against South Africa in Barbados. Initially in Harare, things didn't go exactly according to plan for the new-look India side, captained by Shubman Gill. As we record this podcast, there have been 2 matches of the series, and in match 1, Zimbabwe scrambled to 115 for 9 as spinner Ravi Bishnoi produced remarkable figures of 4 overs, 2 maidens, 4 for 13. But Zimbabwe, through a spinner of their own, Captain Sikandar Raza with 3 for 16, tied India's batting up in knots, and the visitors folded for 102 with 1 ball unused. Remarkably, there were 4 maidens in the match. It's fair to say, though, that the result tweaked the Tigers' tail as India steamrolled Zimbabwe in match 2. Abhishek Sharma, one half of the Sunrisers' exceptional opening partnership with Travis Head in the IPL, powered to 100 in 46 balls, and with Ruturaj Gaikwad and Rinku Singh adding 87 in the final 6 overs, India surged towards 234 for 2, winning by 100 runs as Avesh Khan of the Rajasthan Royals took 3 for 15 with his seamers. Subas, Shubman Gill said after the first game that his side were rusty, but was that an excuse for that performance, or should we look elsewhere, to the pitch perhaps?
Well, the batting performance shows that they were rusty. I think the first innings itself shows it was going to be difficult in the match, but chasing 116, you need to you have your top order firing, and this is a young team. It was a bit of pressure for them as well, but needing hitting of 12 and the way he was batting, I think it was winnable, but credits to Muzarwani and Satara, they well done well for the last 2 overs.
But Subas, what about that display of batting power in game 2? That's why the future looks bright for India in this format, isn't it?
Well, I think they amended what went wrong in the game 1. Everyone except Gill fired that game. They took the responsibility up their sleeves. Abhishek Sharma looked like he was fresh off the IPL and pounced on the bowlers throughout his innings. The fact that he got out early, I think the big total was on cards for him. But Rinku Singh, I think he came back well after that knock, hitting ballers to left, right, and center. So it's a good sign that the youngsters have stood up their role.
John, this really is a crucial series for Zimbabwe, isn't it? It's a visit of India, which puts money in the coffers, of course, through broadcast revenue. But on top of that, it's a chance for the team to get the show on the road again after those recent qualification failures.
Yeah, Zimbabwe's cricket chair said the significance and magnitude of this tour cannot be overemphasised. We know that they're into a rebuilding phase, a necessary one, so it's a big chance. The crowd seem to have turned out, and as we've already talked about, they had much to cheer in the first match. And in the second one, 4 chances were dropped, which didn't help their cause at all. So we'll see how things go in the remaining 3 matches. I would imagine that Zimbabwe would probably want to bat first if the pitches continue to be tacky.
Also, John, what does this series tell us that India are touring a side that hasn't played in the past 2 major ICC men's events? Should we applaud Zimbabwe for making this happen? Question why India aren't touring Namibia or Uganda, who are Africa's 2 representatives at the latest T20 World Cup instead? Or should we ask whether those 2 teams have missed a trick in not piggybacking off the back of this tour to get matches of their own?
It's a guess on my part, but Zimbabwe is a full member, and I imagine the BCC will put full members before associates. The tour was arranged back in February this year, and when it was, Jay Shah said that the BCCI's steadfast commitment to touring and supporting fellow member boards aligns with its principle of bringing about positive transformation, as well as recognising that it's a time of rebuilding for Zimbabwe and that Zimbabwe cricket needed Indian support at this stage. The schedule is very crowded, a lot of forward planning is required. India will tour South Africa in mid-November, 4 T20 matches. It's not that far to Windhoek from there.
Yes, it would be great if associate teams could piggyback off the back of full member tours. That would be a real move in the right direction, I think. Anyway, there are 2 other bits of news to bring you connected with this series. Former South Africa seaman swing bowler Charles Langeveld has assumed the role of Zimbabwe's bowling coach, while former Zimbabwe batter Stuart Matsikinieri, who has spent time as interim head coach, has now become fielding coach. It continues a reshaping of the backroom staff after the T20 qualifying failure last year, after which head coach Dave Houghton stepped down. Langeveld has previously worked with Bangladesh, his native South Africa and Afghanistan. The side's recently appointed head coach is Justin Salmons, someone who has extensive experience in South Africa's high-performance programme. He was appointed last month. There's finally been some cheer for South Africa's women on their tour of India. Laura Volvaart's side lost all 3 one-day internationals and also the test match between the 2 sides, but in the first of 3 2020 internationals, they beat the hosts by 12 runs in a high-scoring match under lights in Chennai. South Africa made 189 for 4, with Tasmin Britt scoring 81 from 56 balls, Marizanne Kapp weighing in with 57 from 33 deliveries, and Captain Volvaart making 33. In response, despite Smriti Mandhana's 46 from 30 balls at the top of the order and an unbeaten 53 in 30 deliveries from Jemima Rodrigues, India finished on 177 for 4. Game 2 was then abandoned because of rain after South Africa posted a competitive 177 for 6, and that included 52 from 39 balls by Brits. Subas, it seems remarkable that despite those innings from Mandhana and Rodrigues, India couldn't chase down the target. What went wrong for them, do you think?
Well, they lost their way in the middle overs, the clock try and 90 clock. I think they bowled excellent 4 overs in the middle, taking wickets of set batters. And the wicket in consecutive balls pinned pressure on new batters, 17 runs and 2 wickets from over 9 to 14. I think that's where the game turned. And even though they got 18 runs of penultimate over, I think the game was already lost.
And John, Tasmin Britt's contribution to that victory in game 1 run really was a lesson in perseverance, wasn't it? She took 10 balls to get off the mark and didn't seem as though she was going to hit the ball off the square. But having used up those deliveries, she didn't compound the issue by throwing her wicket away, and then she found great support from Marizanne Kapp, who has to be one of the best all-rounders in world cricket.
Yeah, let's not forget that Brits has recently recovered from a knee injury. She was playing her first T20I game in 3 months, having played in 3 ODIs, scoring only 61 runs in those. She revealed that Kapp gave her some advice during her early innings struggle, saying that she was leaning backwards so that she might try moving her head forwards a bit more. So it seems that Kapp is not only a fine all-rounder, but a source of sound advice. An interesting fact about Brits is that she was an Olympic-level javelin thrower and missed the 2012 London Games because of a road accident.
Yes, a fantastic athlete, Tasmin Brits, and great to see her in the runs in that T20I series. The washout, incidentally, in Game 2 means South Africa will leave with at least a share of the series, some reward after their battling displays in the One-Day Internationals and the Test match. John, the head of the T20I series, Sneha Rana, who took 10 wickets in the Test win for India, said there should be a World Test Championship for women, as there already is for the men. What do you think about that, I wonder, given how expensive Test cricket is to stage and how few teams play it in the women's game? Is it unrealistic, that thought, or is she right to dream big like this?
Well, there's nothing wrong in dreaming. I suspect that is what the ICC will think it is. Now, at the moment, there isn't enough women's cricket really played by enough teams. We've got 4 teams, Australia, England, India and South Africa. India's only played, 13 tests since 2000. For Rana, of course, it would be a dream because she's only playing in the red ball format. One thing you can say about the suggestion is would give a framework even to those 4 teams.
Yes, it would be fascinating if it could come to pass, but I think there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before we get to that stage. The third and final match of this T20I series between South Africa and India is taking place as we record this podcast. For India, it's all part of their build-up to the Asia Cup that takes place later this month in Sri Lanka, while for South Africa, the tour has offered the chance to play in conditions that are expected to be like those for the T20 World Cup in Bangladesh, all set for the beginning of October. Remember, South Africa were runners-up to Australia in the previous edition of that tournament. That was on home soil in early 2023. And another news line for you is that Hilton Moureng, who was the South Africa women's coach for 11 years before his tenure ended in March of this year, has now been named as head coach for the USA senior and under-19s women's teams. England's women are continuing to dominate their New Zealand counterparts in white ball action. We spoke about the first 2 matches of their one-day international series in our previous podcast, and England sealed a clean sweep of that series with a 5-wicket win in match 3 in Bristol, where, in a match reduced to 42 overs per side, they restricted New Zealand to 211 for 8 before knocking off the runs with 3 overs and 2 balls in hand. Lauren Bell took 5 for 37 for the hosts, while Amelia Kerr made 57. England stuttered in the chase, slipping to 33 for 3 and then 72 for 4 before Nat Sciver-Brunt with an unbeaten 76, Amy Jones with 50 and Alice Capsey, batting at number 7, made a busy 35 from 30 balls, and between them that trio saw the side home. In the first 2020 international, England made 197 for 3 off the back of Danny Wyatt's 76 in 51 balls and an impressive 47 from 23 deliveries by Sciver-Brunt. And in reply, New Zealand were never in contention. They finished with 138 for 9, with leg spinner Sarah Glenn taking 3 for 16. John, before the 2020 international series started, Heather Knight, the England captain, said they would look to try out some tactics ahead of the T20 World Cup in Bangladesh, and we saw that in match 1 as she used 4 spinners and 14 overs of spin. Did it surprise you to see them going down such a route in conditions far removed from those they're likely to face in Bangladesh? It obviously worked, though, as one look at the scorecard shows.
At first sight, yes, was a surprise, especially as they started bowling short. which I didn't think was a very good tactic on that pitch. It does show pre-planning for Bangladesh, as you mentioned, although it does mean they'll have to rely on all-rounders to fill in for a bit of pace with Natsua Brunt and Freya Kemp in this particular match. I mean, you say that New Zealand were never in contention, but they were 63 for 1 after 8.3 overs, with Bates going particularly well before a dramatic collapse, and they lost 5 wickets with 4 runs in 8 deliveries.
Yes, it's been the story of their tour, that really, hasn't it? It's been a disaster, really, particularly from a batting perspective. Subas, New Zealand were more competitive in the third and final one-day international, at least, after being thumped in the first 2 games in that format. Hammered again in the first 2020 international. Can you see any light at the end of the tunnel for them? Leah Tahuhu took 2 wickets in that 2020 international, having returned to the side after the birth of her second child to partner Amy Satterthwaite. But positives do seem thin on the ground for them, don't they?
It looks tough for New Zealand, if you ask me. Even in the match that went close, I think they did not cash on the start they got. If they want result, the start they got, I think that they should have been winning, like John mentioned. England are better resourced for the T20 format, and that's what we saw at the end result. The conditions are tough for New Zealand already, so it's going to be even hard to get over the result going forward.
The second T20 international is taking place under lights at Hove as we record this podcast, and the 5-match series wraps up with a game also under lights at Lord's on Wednesday, the 17th of July. With the first test of 3 between England and the West Indies men's sides getting underway as we record this podcast, it gives us the opportunity to farewell one of the true greats of the game, England's James Anderson. He was given the tap on the shoulder by coach Brendan McCullum and captain Ben Stokes ahead of this summer, and that first match at Lord's will be his 188th and final test of a remarkable international career that began when he was drafted into England's white ball squad in Australia following an injury crisis. He starts his final test on 700 wickets, the most by any fast bowler in the history of the format, with only Muttiah Muralitharan with 800 and Shane Warne with 708 ahead of him. The Lord's Test was set to be his 401st appearance in an England shirt, and in some ways it's an appropriate place for him to wrap things up, given he made his Test debut there against Zimbabwe in 2003, taking 5 for 73 in the first innings. Only one player, that's Sachin Tendulkar of India, has played more tests in the history of the game, and once his final match is wrapped up, he'll link up with the England side as a fast-bowling mentor. John, with a career of this scale, where do you even begin to sum it up?
Well, I wish I didn't have to, as it feels a bit premature to me. I know they're planning for the Ashes and that Anderson's performance is beginning to taper off a bit. I think his mentoring is probably more value this summer on the field. It's not as if the replacements are all young, fit and reliable. I don't see why he couldn't have played through this summer. He's a well-oiled machine with a simple action, allows him to produce it seemingly in perpetuity, and it's all allied to very high-level skill set, which has produced a number of memorable spells, especially in favourable conditions. And he strikes me as a cricketer and a man of integrity.
Yes, he certainly indicates that he is ready to go for this Test match, coming into the game, having picked up a 7 for against Nottinghamshire in Southport. An outstanding analysis from him yet again, and that was his first-class game of the season for Lancashire. John, I wonder, is there a moment above all others, or a couple of moments maybe, that give you a warm glow when you reflect upon that career?
I think overall, the warmest moments for me have been watching him bowl in tandem with Broad, although my mind did go back to first Ashes Test in 2013 at Trent Bridge, Nottingham, when he bowled 13 overs on the last day, claiming Brad Haddin as the last wicket, with only 14 runs separating the teams.
Yes, I heard an interview with Anderson coming into the Test match, and he said that was one of his particular highlights. Subas, surely Anderson's greatest achievement has been the way he's performed across all conditions and overseas as well, proving he isn't just someone who needed help from the pitch or the atmosphere in order to confound batters. Do you know he took 266 wickets away from home?
Yeah, and I think that made him special. The way he performed away from home in tough conditions, he held the role very well. And against India, he averaged 25 and took 149 wickets, and he was on par with greats of the game like Sachin Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, the two generational talents. So I think his longevity of career is, I think, what he takes most pride in, what he just spoken about, and play against generation of players, to be present for England, not playing anywhere in the franchise leagues. I think he prioritized his career for England, and he's walking off as a legend just as expected.
Yes, his last fixture for England in coloured clothing was way back in 2015 at the end of that World Cup. I just wonder, Subas, do you have any prime Anderson memories? You mentioned there about the Indian greats. There were his battles, of course, between Tendulkar and Kohli. No bowler actually dismissed Tendulkar more in tests, as Anderson did so 9 times, and he's taken Kohli's wicket 7 times.
For me, it will be NatWest ODI series against India in 2007. It was oddities for me as well, but to have him bowl against Dravid, Tendulkar, Ganguly, with youngsters like Yuvraj, Dhoni, Gambhir coming in, and Answer had a say in that tournament. So I think that's the early memories of him always sticks up in my mind with his white hair and all.
Yes, he did have a few hairstyles through the years. I think that's fair to say. John, the amazing thing is, of course, that Jimmy Anderson could have played even more Test match cricket than he did, as from late 2003 through to 2006-07, there was an attempt by coaches to remodel his action, followed by a back injury that took him out for a season, plus, of course, the combination of Steve Harmison, Andrew Flintoff, Simon Jones and Matthew Hoggard that meant he was often looking in from the outside. How do you reflect on that period now, I wonder? A waste of his time and ability, or a necessary part of his development?
I don't think we're ever going to know. You know that the attempt to remodel his action because his spine was shaped like an S, and the coaches thought he was going to get injured. They also thought he could bowl faster with a different action. As you mentioned, he got injured after that and didn't bowl particularly well. And it was a New England coach, Kevin Shine, who basically told him to go back to his old action. And maybe all that gave him extra determination to keep going once he returned and not let people influence him whom he didn't trust. Again, as been well documented, he did contemplate retirement in 2016, at the end of the English season, but Stuart Broad talked him out of it, by all accounts. And, thank goodness he did, because it would have been very, very premature. And I think it's also instructive that his Test wickets, he took 343 at 30 apiece in his first decade and 357 at 22 in his second. And I think that probably says as much about Anderson's bowling as it does about the people he was bowling at.
Yes, what an absolutely inspirational set of figures they are. And talking of improving, that 7 for 35 we mentioned a little bit earlier against Nottinghamshire in his first-class match of the season. He's now got 1,122 first-class wickets, John. Would you like to see him continue to play first-class cricket, or should this test be an end of his career full stop?
Well, I would like to see him continue to play. He's the sort of person who you could see bowling in perpetuity. I think Lancashire certainly would like him to play, but we'll have to see what his duties as bowling mentor to the England team might do. They might very well preclude that. I think it's going to be up to Jimmy, isn't it, really?
Yes, I guess I'm in the same camp as you there, John. I would love to see him bowl and keep bowling, because it's such a joy to see a wonderful practitioner like him. Yeah, it would be very disappointing indeed if we were to think to ourselves that we were never going to see him bowl again. One more news line for you from the West Indies tour, and Shamar Joseph missed the West Indies warm-up game before the Lord's Test. That was against a county select 11, as he and initially at least Gudakesh Motti were unable to fly because of the after effects of Hurricane Beryl, which rampaged its way through the Caribbean. Motti, the left-arm spinner, was late on show too because of those flight delays, but with both sides using 13 players during the game, Motti at least was able to bowl 9 overs. Both Motti and Joseph were part of the West Indies T20 World Cup squad, although both played very limited roles in that tournament. That county select 11 match against the West Indians was at Beckenham near London, and it finished as a draw, with Kevem Hodge scoring 112, while Mikhail Louis, Alnick Athanase and Kirk Mackenzie also passed 50 for the touring side, but of more concern for the West Indians, they managed to take only 6 wickets across 95.3 overs against a side made up of players who were not required by their counties during the round of county championship matches that took place at the same time. The T20 bandwagon is rolling remorselessly on after the completion of the Men's T20 World Cup, with the second season of Major League Cricket now underway in the USA. As we record this podcast, 4 of the scheduled 25 matches have already taken place, split across 2 venues. That's Grand Prairie in Texas, which staged 4 games during that T20 World Cup, and 1,200 miles east at Church Street in North Carolina, which is hosting 9 matches in this tournament. There are 6 teams in action: MI New York, the Texas Super Kings, the Los Angeles Knight Riders, the Seattle Orcas, Washington Freedom, and the San Francisco Unicorns. With the first 4 of those named owned by IPL franchises, the Orcas, they're under the same group that run the Delhi Capitals. So far, in a repeat of the result of last year's final in match 1 of this year's tournament, MI New York beat the Seattle Orcas in a low-scoring match, which had shades of that final, in one sense at least, as Nicholas Pooran's batting was again the difference. In the 2023 final, he made 137 not out from 55 balls, and this time he scored 62 from 37 deliveries, the decisive contribution as his side chased 109 to win with 5 wickets and 5.4 overs in hand. USA fast bowler Ali Khan's 4 for 33 was decisive in the Los Angeles Knight Riders' 12-run win over the Texas Super Kings in match 2, and in match 3 there was a feeling of deja vu from the World Cup as bad weather affected Washington Freedom's match against MI New York. Washington won by 4 runs under the Duckworth-Lewis-Stern method as they reached 55 for 1 in 7.4 overs thanks to Steve Smith's 46 not out from 28 balls. They were chasing MI New York's 154 for 9, which included USA left-armer Saurabh Netravalkar taking 3 for 24. Match 4 saw San Francisco chase down 166 to beat Los Angeles, winning with 4.4 overs in hand, thanks to blazing half-centuries by Finn Allen of New Zealand and Australia's Matthew Short. Subas, surely one of the most encouraging aspects of the early matches of this tournament is that USA players, albeit experienced and established ones, are having a say in the results.
Well, that is how this league should be played, I think, bringing stars so that the local talents can flourish and get experience of these players, to see players like Nitish Kumar batting in between Sakib, Miller, Russell, Kinzige and Rashid Khan bowling together. And on top of all, Andres House getting to bat with Smith and Head at the top of the order. I think that's going to develop the US cricket even better. And I think this is something ILT20 and other associate leagues should be learning from, that they should bring in foreign players, but not at the expense of their local players not getting to show their talent. And MLC, I think the USA cricket's progression in the World Cup, I think this will just add up to their development process.
Yes, it looks certainly from this distance that they're getting the balance right at the moment, MLC. John, there was only one England player, that was Jason Roy, who appeared in the first 4 matches. There's a brief clash this season with the 100 in the UK as that tournament gets underway on July the 23rd. But do you expect more England and English-based players to look seriously at playing in this tournament in the years to come, especially as it now, of course, has List A status, meaning the runs and wickets count towards their T20 career records?
I would expect more of those whose careers are coming to a close to show an interest, especially those who may not have benefited or been able to benefit much from participating in other franchise tournaments.
Well, talking of the 100, as I was a moment ago, some news since our previous podcast is that Harry Brook, the Yorkshire batter, has been appointed captain of the Northern Superchargers for this season. It's all part of a revamp by that team after they finished bottom of the regular season standings under captain Tom Banton and head coach James Foster in 2023. Former England all-rounder Andrew Flintoff has already taken over the coaching duties this season. John, we discussed on the previous episode of this podcast about England's T20I captaincy options after a disappointing World Cup, and Harry Brook's name has already been bandied about in that regard. Is this appointment part of an inexorable direction of travel towards that coming true, do you think?
Well, one could regard this as a testing ground, but I really hope they don't rush him. He needs to focus on his batting and get that mature before he becomes captain.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the path that not only the Northern Superchargers follow, but also England down the track, because, of course, they've got decisions to make now in the wake of that T20 World Cup disappointment. We'll stay across all the action, by the way, in the MLC and, of course, the 100 when it gets underway, and report back in future episodes of The Wicket. We mentioned in our previous podcast that the Lanka Premier League was underway, and at the time of recording, we're 10 matches into the 24 that will make up this year's tournament, that wraps up with a final on Sunday, the 21st of July. So far, the Jaffna Kings have shown themselves to be one of the sides to beat. They lost their opening fixture to the Gaul Marvels, with Alex Hales weighing in with 65 from 47 balls for Gaul, but since then they've won 3 matches in a row. Gaul have also impressed so far, also with 3 wins from 4 matches, and they've within their ranks Zahoor Khan, the UAE seam bowler, who's been one of the leading wicket takers in the tournament thus far. On the other side of the ledger, Dambulla Sixers were the only side to fail to win any of their first 3 matches, and perhaps that's no surprise given the chaotic build-up to their season, with their owner arrested over corruption allegations and the team's name changed from Dambulla Thunder when a new ownership run locally but with control via a Los Angeles-based company emerged. The good news for Dambulla was that they got their first win in their 4th outing, a convincing 8-wicket success against Colombo strikers, as Kushal Pereira hammered 80 from 50 balls against an attack that included Matisha Patirana, Taskin Ahmed, the Bangladesh vice-captain, and Pakistan leg-spinning all-rounder Shadab Khan. Subas, what have your early impressions of the tournament been?
Yeah, for me, it's about the associate players getting the chance. Mohammad Wasim had a good game first up. Zahoor Khan has been bowling really well, and with franchise league growing like mushroom these days, I think these associate players are getting chances too. And with fixture classes, all the players that are able to perform, I think they'll be getting the chance, and hopefully they'll continue to grow so that other players of such stature will get this opportunity as well.
And Subas, what about the latest innovation, the power blast in overs 16 and 17, with only 4 fielders allowed outside the 30-yard circle? That's in addition to the usual power play when in the first 6 overs only 2 fielders are allowed outside that circle. What do you make about the power blast?
This is yet another experiment that was uncalled for. I think having rules of their own to pull in the crowds or make, let's say, promoting attacking cricket, it seems at the moment. But one thing is, this won't be the case when they go to play the international cricket or other leagues. So it's local rules that's good for domestic cricket to promote their cricket. But I think they should see about what repercussions this brought as they go in international scenario.
John, I think I can guess your response to the power blast.
Yet another gimmick, but it seems to me that the various franchise leagues are all trying to have a gimmick of their own that they can sort of be associated with, and not patent in the true sense of the word, but put their own mark on something, and maybe even hoping it gets taken up by the other franchises.
Well, that's all for the future, of course, as to whether the power blast has any legs for the future. But John, I guess we can't really be surprised by Dambulla's start, can we? The destabilising effect of that ownership change and the reason for it, so close to the start of the season, can have done the side no good at all. But that win over Colombo, though, can they still rescue their season, do you think?
But you say we can't really be surprised. It's going to take time to settle in. Looks like bowling's been the issue. They've put runs on the board. They have 2 matches coming up against Gaul, I think consecutive matches, which will determine their fate. You would think that Gaul will probably, hold the cards.
One other piece of Sri Lankan news for you, and that's that ex-Sri Lanka captain and former Cricket World Cup winner Sanath Jayasuriya has been appointed as the men's team's interim coach following the resignation of Chris Silverwood following the T20 World Cup. Jayasuriya will hold the role for limited overs matches against India at home and the England tour, which runs until the 3rd week of September. He previously held the role of chief selector and was a consultant with the side during the T20 World Cup. He's only recently returned to frontline cricket earlier this year after a 2-year ban handed down by the ICC for failing to cooperate with its anti-corruption and security unit. John, your reaction to the news of Jayasuriya's appointment?
Well, he's plenty of cricket experience. He's very well known in the country, of course. He does have a little coaching experience. Well, I think he did some with Dambulla last year. As you mentioned, his refusal to cooperate with investigations sort of marks him down as a singular person. We know that Jayawardene has resigned in the last month as consultant coach. It's got some sort of spikes to it as this appointment, and to me, it does look rather like a stopgap.
Yes, Subas, John mentioning there that Mahela Jayawardene has recently walked away from his own consultant's role, so perhaps all is not as well as it could be. And I just wonder, do you think a Sri Lankan, all the same, might be best placed to get the best out of this team, especially the batters who've been underperforming for a while?
Well, he was with the team in the World Cup and knows the current team inside out. Someone who revolutionized the attacking batting in modern cricket. I think he just needs to giving his words of wisdom and hope the players will replicate that. The bowling unit has been fantastic, but it's the batting that needs to step up. And with the transition phase of Sri Lanka looking for a new coach, I think he was a good option who knows the team inside out, being with them for a long time.
Now it's time to reflect on some disturbing news that Nafis Iqbal, who worked for Bangladesh as their logistics manager at the T20 World Cup, suffered a brain hemorrhage after the squad returned home from that tournament. The good news is the latest reports have him stabilised and everyone's hopeful he'll make a full recovery. He played 11 tests and 16 one-day internationals. An opening batter, he scored a test 100 against Zimbabwe, played in the 2004 ICC Champions Trophy in England, and his last one-day international was the famous match at Cardiff in 2005 when Bangladesh beat Australia as Mohammad Ashraful made 100 from 101 deliveries. At that time, it was probably Bangladesh's greatest victory at international level. And everyone here at the Wicket sends Nafis Iqbal their very best wishes for a full and speedy recovery. And finally, gentlemen, as we always do, let's hear from you about something or some things that have caught your attention this week in the world of cricket. John, first of all?
Well, it has to be the county championship match between Gloucestershire and Glamorgan. A total of 1,578 runs scored, 35 wickets claimed, and then a tie off the last ball. Glamorgan wanting 1 run to win, with a batter brilliantly caught one-handed by the wicketkeeper. They were set 5-9-3 to win. Daniel Fountain, Arab News stuff, put out the alert. And it was the first tied county championship match in 6 years. And the 5-9-2 all-out for Glamorgan was the highest fourth innings score in any first-class match since 1949. Quite incredible.
Yes, it was incredible, and all power to the long form of the game. I think all three of us were watching that feed from Cheltenham College and thoroughly enjoying a rapturous end to that match. But John, in addition to that, you've also written a column about the rise of Italian cricket, haven't you?
Yes, very recently. This was precipitated by an introduction to the author of 2 books on the growth and development of Italian cricket since 1793, would you believe? So various ups and downs, mainly downs, I have to say. But they are really striking out now with the combination of local players, mainly of South Asian descent, who have citizenship within Italy. And they're also taking on a number of 4 or 5 players who've got vast county championship experience. Gareth Berg is the coach, once of Middlesex and Northants. Wayne Madsden has scored 15,000 runs in county cricket in 14 or 15 years. So, and this is a big attempt to try and qualify for the 2026 T20 World Cup. They're going to face some pretty stiff opposition from Scotland and Jersey. And now I read that Germany are looking to get in on the act by hoping to poach Tom Kohler-Cadmore, whose mother is German, to play for them alongside his brother, who already does play for Germany. So I think there's a certain awakening happening, ambitions forming in European countries to go a little bit higher.
Well, terrific news there. And of course, you can add to that list of Italian batters. Joe Burns, the former Australia opener, who's moved over there. He's got some Italian heritage. So if you fancy catching up with Jon's column there, you can have a read of it at arabnews.com/cricket. Sabash, what have you come up with for the past week?
So I was at the MLC match and say that cricket in US is growing. The stars are there, the fans in attendance as well. And Alex Carey was getting the drinks, and the fans called him by his name, signed their caps, and there were lots of other players who were busy doing that. So I think the World Cup has had some impact, but it's mostly the South Asian community that's turning up for the games. But the way MLC is being conducted and the stars, and so I think it's a positive sign.
Well, that's good to hear. Sabash still on duty over in the USA and keeping an eye on MLC for us. And well, it is very encouraging to hear that there is such enthusiasm for cricket in the USA after the T20 World Cup. Well, that's all for this episode of The Wicket. We'll be back soon with more cricket chat from the Gulf region, Asia and worldwide. As ever, please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment on what you've heard wherever you get your podcast. That's all for now, though. So this is Brian Murgatroyd along with Jon Pike and Subas Humagain saying thanks for listening. And for the next 2 episodes, we'll be taking a break. And instead of our usual format, you'll hear interviews with significant figures in cricket in the Middle East. So keep an eye out for them in your podcast feeds, as believe me, they'll be well worth your time. For now, though, from all of us here, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.